What's going on, guys? My name's Adam. Welcome back to Driven Productions. We're in the HQ with two of my very good friends, Tim and Aaron. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Now, if you saw the thumbnail, we are talking about the NACS, the North American Charging Standard. And if you have a Ford or Rivian or a Taycan, Porsche, whatever, you may be interested to listen up to what we're talking about today, because we have a feeling that you're not fully aware of what's actually going on if you buy one of these things. So let's get into it. So how this came to be is that Tim messaged me and was like, hey, just recently they're sending out adapters to Rivian owners. And of course, this is Aaron's fully loaded. I mean, this thing has like 900 horsepower, right? It's the R1S, it's incredible. We reviewed it and I'll put a link to it. But Tim was like, hey, Aaron or any Rivian owner will not have full access to all 30,000 US chargers.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I was like, well, what do you mean? Because if they give you the adapter, why wouldn't they have access to all the chargers, right? So why don't you clarify for the folks what that really means?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and Ford, I think, is also getting those adapters right now as we speak. And I think there's going to end up being a lot of confusion on this subject, specifically because, those adapters, for these cars will only work with V3 and V4 superchargers and newer, first and foremost. But then on top of that, they're not even getting access to every single V3 or V4 charger on the market. There's a pretty large number of V3 superchargers in terms of stalls, actually in the thousands of stalls that they do not have access to today, likely won't for the foreseeable future, and that basically Tesla has chosen to keep those, at least for now, as Tesla exclusive supercharging locations, even for V3 and V4 chargers. This may not sound like a big deal. You're like, oh, I'm just missing an extra charger in town in Nashville. But I think the general public's going to find out pretty quickly that this can be a pretty big deal depending on where you live. Now, if you're fortunate to live in, say, California, where there's a humongous, charging presence for all brands of chargers, this may or may not be a problem for you at all. But if you live in Montana, if you live even in Tennessee, I mean, right now, you'll have access to some chargers in Memphis, and you'll have access to some chargers in Nashville. But you're not going to get Jackson, and you're not going to get Dixon in between. Because Dixon's a V2 or V1 supercharger, and
I didn't know that.
And Jackson, they did just upgrade to a V3. They made it 24 stalls now, but interestingly, it still does not have access to the newer to the non-Tesla brands.
So let's be realistic, though. It is better for the Lightning owners and the Rivian owners that they have more access to more chargers. But what you're basically saying is they're not able to do anything below V3. So why is that?
So there's some technical limitations behind that. That basically, for those vehicles to be able to charge on a Tesla supercharger, the Tesla supercharger itself has to actually support the CCS protocol. And CCS, there's a lot of confusion behind it, but CCS, for the
for layman's, what is CCS?
So it's the combined charging standard. I believe we might want to edit that in a second. We'll find out. But the combined charging standard, and what it is it was essentially the plug that Europe won. So in Europe, that's the only plug there is. Tesla phased out their NACS, the North American charging standard, several years ago. But the North American charging standard, luckily for us, won in North America because it is the better cord and the better plug.
Let me clarify this. So there's around, 30,000 chargers in the United States?
According to the EPA's estimates today,
total?
there is.
That's V3, V4, and V1 and V2.
Exactly.
30,000 total.
Exactly.
Mostly Teslas, right?
Mostly, and that's all. That's actually the Tesla figure.
That's just Teslas.
That's just Tesla.
Okay, so there's probably closer to 40 or 50,000 in total.
Exactly. In North America as a whole, not just America.
What percentage do you feel like out of the 30,000 Tesla chargers has Aaron and his Rivian unlocked with the adapter?
Overall, I'd say about half.
Half.
And
so
probably,
not Montana, not Jackson in certain areas, but still better than nothing, right?
No, better than nothing. It's a huge upgrade. And the thing is, they could still use Electrify America, so it's absolutely a win to offset it. Now,
sure.
A lot of people might be asking, why wouldn't they open up the whole network immediately, right?
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And weren't you telling me that some vehicles will take up 2 stalls?
Most of the vehicles actually will take up 2 stalls.
What about this one right here?
It would take up 2 stalls.
And let's talk about that for a second. So I want to do point of view. So we'll pick this clip up. So Tim, for the folks that don't know, explain the difference between the Tesla charging location and the charging location on most other brands.
Yeah, it's a great question. So every Tesla ever made will always have the plug on the back left of the vehicle. Meaning that typically most stall designs you have to back in and you're always going to be on the back left. There are some pull-throughs and some odd designs out there, but the vast majority by and large are that way. Now you'll see that's different on this Rivian, and this is the case on most other EVs, is not many wanted to be like Tesla. So they put them on different locations of the vehicle, and basically, it's on the front up here, and so you have it on the front left. Now that means if you pull into a stall to charge this, you're going to be in the other side of that stall than you wouldn't be a normal, a Tesla.
Exactly.
So if a Tesla comes in behind you, they're going to, essentially you're going to be taking up 2 stalls.
Right.
And the only one that could pull up next to you would be another Rivian. And then
Right.
you add in the confusion, then you get, say, a Lightning or you get a Mach-E. It's actually even in the instructions.
You could lose half your stalls.
Half your stalls. I mean, Ford's actually given official instructions to people to take up 2 stalls. I mean, it's in writing. We know this is true now. For V1 through V3 chargers. Now, V4 solves this with a longer cord for the most part with most brands.
Wow, that's interesting. And that actually brings me to another issue, which is as a Tesla owner, and I want to talk about this on camera. So let's jump off. All right, so I have owned Teslas for 4 or 5 years now, right? I'm about to get the Cybertruck. I've had 2 Model X's and a Model S. So I feel like I've been around the block, all right? And one of the biggest reasons why I bought a Tesla is because of the charging network, okay? And now, let me before I even say now, I was at a charger 2 months ago on a road trip, pulled in, there was a line. Now, thankfully, I was able to be the last car to get a bay, right? But I'd say there was 3 or 4 Teslas just sitting there waiting in queue. And I don't know if he does it on the screen or they're just being nice to each other, like who was next, but they worked it out. You throw in a bunch of these in there, you throw in taking 2 bays up, if there was a problem in that area before, now there's a real problem, right? And so what do we do as Teslas? Like, I don't understand why Tesla owners aren't more pissed about this.
And you're right. And so there's 2 things actually I want to touch on here that you touched on.
Does that make sense, guys? Like, go in the comments if you're a Tesla owner and let people know, like, if you got problems already, what is this?
Absolutely.
Definitely
like comment about it.
Taking up 2 bays going to do?
Or if you've already seen it on the road, if you've already seen it happen, if you've seen a Lightning or something pull up, comment, tell us about it.
I've only seen one Ford, I think it was a Mach-E charging, and that's it. So they haven't done the adapters yet, but if they start shipping these things out like crazy,
they're shipping them right now. So, and I'm glad you said that because you actually brought up another point that I wasn't even planning on talking about today. Is that say there is a line, so you get to a charger, there is a line. Right. Say a Rivian's the next one to pull up, and they realize a spot opens up for them. They pull in, they realize they can't even charge at it. So what are they going to do? They're going to get it's just going to create a lot.
That's 100% right, because if they can't get that particular side because there's somebody that's normally a Tesla. What are they going to do?
Exactly.
That's going to cause a lot of issues, and nobody's talking about this, guys. And I'm telling you, like, if you're in an area of the world, and Nashville's one of them, there's only 4 or 5 decent chargers, and it's busy, especially during certain times of the year when there's a lot of road trip season, and spring breaks and stuff, when there's a lot of just traffic, you're going to be SOL.
And I will say, to Tesla's credit, they have been steadily increasing the supercharger. I think just in the greater Nashville area alone, I've seen 3 to 5 new supercharger locations permitted over the last 90 days.
Sure.
Jackson doubled from a 10 or 12 stall to a 24 stall. It went to a V3 at the time.
Right.
So they are increasing the stall count. I think they are doing as much as they can on the front end, but it still isn't going to help them much if they have new vehicles that are coming onto the network, taking up 2 stalls every time they come.
Here's an honest question. Help me understand why Tesla did this.
I think Tesla did this because they knew that they were going to be forced to switch to CCS within the next 1 to 3 years if they didn't do more to proactively encourage others to use NACS. And what I mean by that is to actually open source NACS, to not charge a license fee for it, which they did, to essentially give away the design. And they knew that if they didn't do this over the next 1 to 3 years, depending on whoever the next political administration was or anything like that, they knew that they were going to be forced to switch all their superchargers to CCS. They knew that the writing was already on the wall. I mean, it's happening in some states. There are states that were mandating them to have CCS and NACS. They've already went through it in Europe. I mean, and frankly, we as Tesla owners, I think, are still winning by at least having our plug still. Otherwise, we would have a bigger plug that, in my opinion, has a few things about it that.
Are you not saying something though? Like, for example, did they get a lot of money from the government?
I think it will open up some. I think they were incentivized to a degree.
But you know, a lot of they were and they weren't, because even today the federal government's still actually requiring them to have CCS as a part of getting any incentives for opening up a new charging location. Which is also the $1 million question: is when are they going to stop requiring them to have CCS on new charger installs? Yeah.
Yep. That's
If that's the plug that won, I think the federal government's going to have to wake up and realize it eventually.
I think regardless, though, guys, you are going to have, like, there's going to be a short-term issue for not only Rivian, Lightning, Mach-E, whatever, Taycan owners, or there's going to be a short-term issue for us with the fact that they're just taking up our stalls.
Absolutely.
I think this is gonna frustrate EV owners even more so than they already are frustrated with depreciating values, high interest rates, kind of a backlash in overall EV adoption right now.
And frankly, to your point,
EV hate's pretty high right now, gotta be honest.
It is, but I've known about 5 different people I know who've just bought their first EV in the last month.
And what did they get? Just out of curiosity.
Almost all of them got Teslas.
Now why?
Because again, the supercharger network. That's the number one reason.
Point,
that's the number one reason.
But here you go, right? That's our number one competitive advantage of getting one of these, and now it's kind of going.
It is.
Going away.
But
so anyway, it's kind of a little frustrating. It makes me a little salty. I gotta be honest.
It's a little salty, but I think what might be saltier is some of the owners that have CCS plugs, when they realize come next year, in 2025, when brands like Rivian and Ford and GM, all of them start adding Tesla's plug-in. No one has said this, but I would be completely shocked and amazed if they switch to Tesla's plug and they keep it in the same location. Because it just makes too much sense that at that point they would either move it to the back of the car,
correct,
or they would move it to the front right so it can park in in a stall and not it can pull in instead of backing in, and it can not take up 2 stalls.
And so what you're saying is any old vehicles like this are going to be dinosaurs because nobody's going to want to buy them. They're going to depreciate even more because
they're going to depreciate even more. And I think initially the depreciation hit's not going to be as drastic on the front end, but if you fast forward that about 5 years from now, I think you're going to see a lot more of that impact. And the bigger thing is, like, no one's talked about this either, but I'm dead convinced that when they move that port, Tesla is going to open up more of their chargers for the ones that have actual ports built in. Meaning that if you have a V1, V2, it's going to magically be compatible with
it. Makes perfect sense because now they're not taking up 2 stalls.
Exactly.
It's only a matter of time before Tesla backlash, because you can go on Tesla and you could message them about the supercharger, you take photos of it, you can tell them all about your experience.
Exactly.
It usually pops up with a prompt when you leave. How's your charging experience? If you say there was no spaces because 3 a-hole Rivians were taking up my bays, I don't know how that's going to go over well. Or 3 bolts, or 3 Lightnings, or 2 Mach-Es and a Porsche Taycan. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's.
I mean, we'll be honest.
The bolt's kind of
the bolt's the redheaded stepchild of the EV world, isn't it? So I mean, if you pull up to, tell me how mad you would be if you pull up to a Tesla charger and you had 6 bolts sticking up.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, if I pull up and see one of these, okay, it's expensive, it's cool. Like I like the Rivian. I think all Tesla owners do. I like the Taycan. I agree with you though. You get me some like crap economy car taking up 2 car spaces. Like, give me a break. Like I'm gonna be a little salty,
especially when they're slower charging as it is. So. Again, just to recap, like I think when they move that plug, you're going to see a lot of announcements that they all of a sudden have access to older ones, whether it be because of the technical differences with CCS and the protocols behind it. Now they'll be able to support it with the actual Tesla plug.
I don't mean to cut you off, but question: could they not give you a longer cable?
So that's a good question. A lot of people ask, why can't they just give you a longer cable?
You get the adapter from Rivian or Ford or whatever, and then you buy a cable that like one connects. I mean, it's a pain in the butt.
It's a pain in the butt.
You'll have to buy it yourself, but
and logically speaking, it's definitely something a lot of people have wondered, like logically, like why that doesn't happen. There's actually a lot of good. There's some really good reasons behind it, though. Now you remember the older chargers, the one again that none of the non-Teslas are getting access to. How thick that cord was, right? It's a bit. I mean, they're about that big around. I mean, compared to the newer ones that are more like a garden hose. I mean, just about. Yeah. And the reason they were able to shrink that so much is because the newer ones are liquid-cooled cables. So they're actually using liquid to cool that cable because of how much power they're pushing through it. Otherwise, that cable would get, like with how thin it is, it would melt. I mean, with them pushing 250 kilowatts, even 260 actually now with, I'm hitting that on some cars, on the 250 kilowatt chargers.
I never thought about that. So what does it do? Recycle the liquid through a cooling station somewhere in the
so
back?
Like built into the charger, there's actually there's a Freon heat exchanger that uses essentially an HVAC. They have an HVAC cooling the coolant that goes to that battery, so it's not Freon going through that line. It's just regular coolant going through the line, and then that line's going to a Freon heat exchanger, actually on site, built into the charger.
I just learned something.
And that helps cool both. It actually cools the charger as well, so it's not even just the cord. It cools, all the electronics in the charger. Because you're talking about a ton of heat, and you got to think. Even a supercharger is probably pushing 90%, in the 90s of efficiency, maybe in the 80s. But even if it's say as high as 95%, that means you're having 5% of that 250 kilowatts get lost as heat. 5% 250 kilowatts that's a lot of BTUs of heat to be. It's going somewhere.
I never even thought about it.
Yeah.
I never even thought about it, like how they shrunk the cable and they use liquid cooling. That makes a lot of sense. Boy, it's smart.
And so to answer your question, going back to what you were asking about having
how do you have
cable,
a liquid cooled system? It's gonna catch
exactly.
fire.
Especially in the last 2 feet, the last 3 feet.
Yeah, if you plug your adapter in, it's gonna slow charge.
Exactly.
Because it can't fast charge, which defeats the whole purpose of supercharging. Okay, well that answers that question. Wow.
So that's the
That
problem.
really sucks then. All these guys who bought and that's why people are so nervous about EVs. That's why it's still early adoption, because the reality is the thousands and thousands and thousands of Lightning and Taycan owners and Rivian owners, and Aaron, you can come on camera in a minute and tell me what your thoughts are, but that sucks.
It does.
And they're getting screwed.
They are, and I have a lot of friends with Rivians, and some of them don't think it's a big deal at all, and some of them,
because they don't do a lot of traveling, or just because they're not like, I'll take up 2 bays, what do I care? But that's
some of them are more
recent
recent owners, so they bought in the last year. They've seen Electrify America more on its better side. They haven't had bad luck at an EA charger
I want
yet.
Arian to talk about his. Every time I've gone to Electrify America, I've had half the stalls every time not work.
And that's honestly like one of my good friends. He tells me every time, like, oh, it's great, I got right in, I charged, but one of the stalls didn't work, or another stall didn't work, or I pulled in, then there was a line of 4 cars because 3 of the stalls didn't work.
Or
there's only or a bolt. Could you not? Half the time he's telling me a bolt took up half. They had 1 bolt take it up one of the 350 stalls, and the rest are all slow.
Right.
The one car that can't exactly. Can't even use the 350.
No, I know. And
which again goes to the confusion of EVs. Again, Tesla's strategy has been that if they're going to have a charging site, that whole site's going to be consistent. You're not going to have some plugs do this and some plugs do that.
Right.
That just adds to the overall confusion.
It'll charge as fast as the car will allow it to, basically.
Exactly.
Which is if you pull in with a P85D from 2012 like you used to have, it won't charge nearly as fast as this thing, right?
Exactly.
So, but it still works. It's seamless. It's interesting though, guys. You have to admit. Aaron, you had some additional thoughts about your Rivian and whatnot. So fill us in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done a few road trips in it. And I've had experience at all of the different fast chargers, at least the main ones, because I have a Tesla as well. So I've used the Tesla Supercharger network, I've used the Rivian Adventure network, EVgo and ChargePoint, as well as Volta here and there, wherever Shell has decided to put those in. I have only had issues with Electrify America. Every single time I go to one, unless it has literally been brand new, at least 2 of the stalls aren't functioning. And then you get a lot of people that'll come in with like a Chevy Bolt and go and plug in a 350 800 volt charger and take it up for an hour and a half because they can't charge fast. So they're taking up the fastest chargers with the slowest cars. The others have a tendency to all put in the highest kilowatt options available, so it doesn't matter. And I can tell you, I just did a road trip from here to Nashville down to Charleston, and the system navigated me to Rivian chargers the entire way. So those are getting built out, and they were just as easy as any Tesla supercharger. Pulled up, plugged in, instantly started charging, and that should be how it works once the whole Tesla network opens up as well for Rivians by the end of this month, which is March 2024. There will be growing pains. There will definitely be growing pains. Version 2 superchargers operate on an older protocol, so that won't be supported. V3 has the shorter cables, and that means that cars like mine will have to take up 2 stalls, and then you end up with other issues like Lucids and Porsche Taycans, Audi GTs that have 800 volt architectures. Well, those will now only be able to fast charge at V4 superchargers at full speed because they're at a higher voltage. where Teslas, Rivians, Polestars, they all operate at a 400-volt architecture.
There's so much like that manufacturers are going to have to change.
And do you know how many V4 superchargers there are right now?
Barely any of them.
Exactly, that's the problem. Yeah.
But Tesla's going to have to replace most of their chargers with V4s over the coming years anyway, especially with vehicles like the Cybertruck, where the port's pushed a little further back. So even Cybertrucks are having some issues with the length of the cables at the V2 and V3 superchargers. It's not nearly as much of an issue because it is still in the correct spot, but it nonetheless is an issue from Tesla's own car. Like anything, there will be growing pains, but in over a few years, I think that we will reach parity. Everything going in will be NACS chargers, and we'll be able to communicate, plug and charge, and be good to go. Hopefully, cars like mine that do have the CCS will have an option to not just have an adapter, but potentially get retrofitted. So they could maybe move the charger here, replace the bumper, and put the charging port over here and have it be NACS.
That's a really interesting thought. I mean, literally, that's all they would have to do is move it over.
Yeah,
to the left side.
There would definitely have to be some changes in high voltage wiring. I don't know where it exactly comes in,
easy retrofit.
But it can't be easy, but it can't be particularly difficult either.
I don't know. I mean, you have no idea what's going underneath there, right? How many things they would have to remove and re-alter.
That is true.
And fire issues, and who knows, right?
And the charging port isn't a problem with all non-Tesla EVs either. I also have a Polestar 2, and the Polestar 2 is right in the back side of the driver's side, just like a Tesla is. So I could back up in that, plug straight in with an adapter, and that would not have any issues at any of the open superchargers.
I mean, really, what are the manufacturers that have the biggest issues? It's the Lightnings, it's the Fords, right? It's the Rivians.
I would say a Leaf.
The Leafs?
Even the newer Leaf. I mean, I don't know if I would even try to supercharge an older Leaf, but the newer Leaf that's actually a halfway decent electric car now, it's I think still in the middle.
Right.
So it's
wow. I mean, but there are some manufacturers
the Leaf
that aren't
uses a different connector altogether. The Leaf uses CHAdeMO. I
they
think in the
switched
brand new one they have switched it. And it's potential that if it's in the center, that's such a small vehicle that it may not have an issue.
You're right. If you park right on the line, I could see probably reaching at a lot of the charger. Like
Well,
V3s.
even with that, the charger on the Tesla is a little bit back, so it has to pull back a little bit. So it'd be moving towards the center versus a little bit to the side. So it could potentially still work. Although I believe the Nissan Leaf still is a relatively slow, fast charging vehicle.
Even the newest one.
Yeah.
It's not anything like most of the other electric cars on the market. Yeah.
So that was really interesting, guys. I actually have learned quite a bit. I never really even thought about the two bay issue, right? I didn't really think about the 800 volt charging that, Porsche Taycan. But the other thing that's interesting, and Tim was just mentioning this, was about the trucks. And when you are pulling a trailer, it's really a pain in the ass. Like, I'm about to get a Cybertruck, you're about to get a Cybertruck, and this thing, frankly, will tow 5,500 pounds, right? Or 6,000 pounds, they say. And at the end of the day, if you have a trailer and you need to charge, you have to unload the trailer, then you have to reverse it in, and you have to hook up the trailer. If you tow a lot, you're not buying an EV. Let's just be honest.
And that's frankly on top of, you do have less range. I mean,
you lose probably a good percentage more than a diesel truck would otherwise burn through.
Yep.
From what I can see.
I mean, even diesels will lose a lot of range, but I mean, I think it ultimately just boils down to how aerodynamic your trailer is. I mean, if you're pulling a big, giant, tall, 40-foot trailer that's much taller than the vehicle, you're probably going to lose a lot more range. Whereas if you're pulling just a flatbed with.
But how are EVs going to solve this? I mean, if everything's going electric, right? And it seems like in 2023, 2035, 2040, I think 90% of vehicles will be electric, right? How are they going to solve this? Like,
so
are they going to build new chargers that can have the pull-through?
So they already are building them. To his point, he was just saying a minute ago how every Rivian charger that's ever built is actually all had at least multiple stalls that allow pull-through. Tesla is building a lot more stalls that have pull-through. Most of their locations do not have a pull-through.
I haven't been to one yet.
Yeah, in California, they're actually building a 160 stall location right now. It's going to be the new biggest location in the world, and a good 20 of them, I believe, are pull-through locations designed for trucks. Like you can look at the parking lot layout, and I'll send it to you. You can include it in the video.
Sure.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. It's really cool.
Well, that's necessary.
So that's the first thing I think it's going to help solve it. I think, I was really hoping to see more technology pulled from the semi into the Cybertruck to help improve the range. That I don't think you're really seeing yet. For example, I think there's room to have one motor have a significantly higher gear ratio and maybe, slightly. It's not going to be a miracle worker. You're still you're still working with physics here. But I think it could probably improve your range a little bit on the highway if you're towing. If you have a multi-motor setup, you don't really gear it as much for that 0 to 60, but you gear it again towards a really large gear ratio to keep that motor and its efficient RPM range.
Interesting.
Throughout the drive,
And that would be different because Tesla has one gear. So you're talking about going more towards Porsche and having a second gear.
No, it's kind of the best of both worlds. So you still don't have a transmission, but you have the motors geared differently. So and you probably wouldn't want to have on the front they would need to match. Like if you have two motors on the front, I'm sure you would want those to match. But you could have a larger motor in the back that has a way bigger gear, and it's kind of your efficient motor. This is just ideas. I'm sure they've bounced a lot at Tesla. I think the next big thing is going to be a bigger battery. I think that's with their range extender. I was really personally hoping to see that actually in the Cybertruck with that size battery. With the range extender, you're pushing, I think, close to that 170, 175 kilowatt hour total battery pack size. I was really hoping to see that as the actual battery, because then if you think about it, I think eventually you're going to see that, and then you could still have the range extender on top of that. Because that without a trailer, that range extender is supposed to get you to that 470 mile range, give or take. And if you think about it, if that was the actual battery of the truck with a fully loaded option, and you added that to that, you'd probably be getting maybe 600, right? Now then towing, even if you have a really big trailer, you could probably get 300 plus miles out of a big giant trailer at that point.
Up to 11,000 pounds, but yeah.
Exactly.
It's still not going to pull a big Caterpillar or something.
Exactly.
Heavy, right?
But that's where their semi comes in.
The reality is, though, you're still going to need F-250s, F-350s, F-450s for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. For example, I worked for a company one time. They had 20 plus dental clinics. And when I say dental clinic, they were basically enclosed, car haulers. They took 28, 30-foot car haulers. They turned them into a dental trailer, and they brought them to nursing homes on site. Now, again, they had a ginormous diesel fleet. They hated keeping up with them because, again, the people who were driving them every day didn't really treat them like their own. It was a company vehicle.
Sure.
They had to have a whole fleet, monitoring solution to stay on top of if they're changing their oil, if they, if their particulate filters were full, all the different stuff that comes along with a modern diesel, all the headaches that come along with it.
Urea, make sure the urea is filled up so the warranty doesn't burn out and all that.
Exactly, and so I think for them, they certainly want to be able to replace all their trucks with a diesel. There's a lot of times they were taking one from Tennessee and going to Florida with it, and I think that's where they probably would have kept the diesel one.
Sure.
But there was for every one they were doing like that, they had 10 visits that they were leaving their shop in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, going to maybe Nashville or West Nashville and coming back. And that would have been a perfect candidate for a Lightning or a Cybertruck or a Rivian or anything. Because again, these trailers weren't exorbitantly heavy. They certainly would increase the drag significantly in the back. But if you could just go 150, 200 miles, get rid of a generator altogether, because again, they were hauling a generator in the back, to be able to treat patients when they got there. And so if they could have all that in one solution, even if it was a Cybertruck with the extended battery, they would have paid for themselves, within a couple of years, for
really
this company.
Thought, but you still don't get the pull-through trailer. So
exactly.
If they did need to charge it on the way or charge it to get back,
and that's where again, for them,
that's going to be a pain. That's going to add 20 minutes easy.
Exactly. And that's where that scenario comes in again. They're going from, they're going maybe 100 miles each way. They're able to do all that without even having to worry about a charger. Then they're getting all the savings and not having to worry about all the different maintenance that comes along with a diesel trailer.
Yeah, no, people forget about the maintenance on a diesel. These things, they're maintenance free.
Yep.
Like, there's no spark plugs, there's no air filters, there's no oil changes, there's no transmission fluid. There's really not 200 moving parts in an engine to go wrong, right? There's no turbos that burn out, no oil seals to go out, right? And so, you got to keep that in mind, guys. Like, if you put 250,000, 300,000 miles on your diesel, I mean, it's in the shop a lot.
Well, just look at the Semi. I mean, the Semi's numbers, again, the Tesla Semi may not be, the ideal solution for a company that's doing cross-country hauling, going from California to Florida, with a full 80,000 pound load. But the vast majority of semi traffic is really not that scenario. The vast majority.
It's not over the road. It's probably within 8 hours. Yeah.
Exactly. And we'll have to pull the figures to say for sure. I believe it was in the $200,000 a year of savings, or is it $200,000 in 2 years? I believe. We'll post it in the video. But basically they're saying just in fuel and fuel savings alone that the average operator could expect to save close to that 200,000 mark, I believe.
And that's huge. And they're going to have less downtime.
Exactly.
Well, as long as the truck works, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's the bottom line.
I'm sure initially they'll have quirks. Just like my early S. I mean, I had a lot of issues with it early on. It was the first gen everything. It was a 6,000 VIN. Revision A, everything. So
this guy brought a Tesla to my house in 2012. It was like a spaceship back then.
Yep.
I mean, nobody. And
that was without autopilot or anything.
Tesla.
Yeah, it was.
you raised my consciousness. I mean, I wish I had bought so many shares in that company back then.
Yeah, I wish I had done that and not bought the car, honestly.
God,
could have bought more than just one.
I could have ordered a Roadster now. That I could get in 10 years
with $10 million
by 2060.
Exactly. I may not be able to drive by then, but it can drive me maybe.
Honest question. Look, the guy who clicked on this thumbnail is probably considering buying, maybe a Ford or a Rivian. I know right now they're offering a lot of incentives on these things. So would you wait?
I would.
To make the retrofit.
I absolutely, and don't get me wrong, I think the Lightning's a great product. I think the Rivian's a great product. I have multiple friends with Rivians. They're probably going to message me after this video and tell me I'm crazy that they don't have any qualms about buying them. But I went through those early adopter pains with the Model S. In terms of the early supercharger network having more issues back then, having less of them. After being used to a highly functional network that I don't have to have any concern or fear when I'm driving and traveling, I just don't want to go back to that right now. And if you were in the market today, like you didn't just, say your vehicle wasn't just in an accident, you're trying to replace it or something like that. If you can afford to wait, 6-12 months until you see those first, NACS enabled vehicles, I would wait. There's no reason not to. It's only going to help your resale value. There's no doubt about it in my mind that it's going to help the resale value.
Yep.
It
can't hurt your resale value, that's for sure.
You may or may not get access to some of those older chargers. We don't know. My gut feeling tells me you probably will. I think even just the protocol, differences aside, I think part of the reason is, like, if you think about it, Tesla knew that, if they gave them access to, say there was a feasible way for them to give access to these vehicles to the older chargers, then you're taking a vehicle, making it charge even slower, that often has a bigger battery than most Teslas. Again, this Rivian here has a bigger battery than any Tesla on the road other than maybe the Cybertruck.
130 kilowatts?
Yep, that's actually big.
135, damn.
And that's bigger than even the Cybertruck without the range extender that no one's seen yet.
That's a lot of batteries, bro.
So
it's a lot of batteries.
Yeah, and they know that if you were to stick that on a 150 kilowatt charger that's being shared to the stall next to it, that maybe you're getting 100 kilowatts. And I'm not going to say the Rivian's the fastest charging vehicle on the road, but it's not slow. That you're taking up 2 stalls. And then,
that thing's going to take longer than that.
Exactly. All day. So I mean, they knew that.
They both charge at 250.
Well, it's going to take 35% longer though to get to 100% than I'm going to just by default.
Yep.
I only have 100 kilowatts, right?
A bigger tank.
Don't charge to 100%.
Well, especially on the road, if you're leaving home for a road
trip. I will tell you,
trip.
when I'm at superchargers, I typically will do about 90-92% because I want as much range as I can, and I want a cushion, right? I could leave at 85, but I want that extra 5 or 6% because you never know. You could be stuck on 65 in bumper traffic for an hour, right? You just want that extra
the car is
juice.
using the least amount of energy, though.
Yep.
That is when electric cars are the most efficient, is the stop and go traffic.
I know, but if you're burning the heater, for example, if it's cold, you're going to eat the battery.
Sure.
You know that.
Not as
not
as
nice
much
to have
now
a
with
little
the
peace of mind, right? Well, not as much with the new heat pumps.
Exactly.
This one probably is okay, but you buy older ones.
Rivian doesn't have a heat
does not
pump.
have a heat pump.
Yeah,
so
it's great.
It's not that efficient then.
What I can tell you is that when we had the big snowstorm, temperatures dropped way off a few weeks ago. My Model Y, the range dropped quite significantly just sitting outside. This one actually didn't, despite it not having a heat pump.
Interesting.
Once you get into the larger vehicles, the heat pumps don't make as much of a difference in terms of efficiency as they do in the smaller vehicles.
That makes sense.
I could see that. I mean, more mass for it to have to cool,
Exactly.
overnight. That the more mass you have in a battery, it takes that much longer for that battery to cool off, right? And then, of course, the more energy you heat back up, but it's
well, and just because of the sheer size and the fact that it's built as an off-roading vehicle, the battery is much more insulated than it is on a Tesla.
I think that's what it is.
So it doesn't have as much issues with extreme cold because of that insulation.
Now you said the Model Y was parked outside. Was this parked outside too, or?
It was, and my Polestar was parked in the garage, but this lost about 2% overnight when it dropped into the single digits. The Model Y dropped over 10%, and the Polestar didn't drop at all.
And they were all plugged in too?
None of them were plugged in.
I got you. That makes sense. Or else it wouldn't have lost energy, of course.
Honest question, and again, I'm just trying to help people out there. Do you feel like people that live in the Northeast, or just the North, North Dakota, Montana, where it's cold 7-8 months, like
my mother-in-law just bought a Model X in Montana.
I mean, perfect example. Like, do you think that they should avoid an EV?
I actually don't. I think the biggest determining factor of whether or not you should avoid an EV isn't even really if you're north or south or east. I think at least in America today, in most places, unless you are fortunate to live in an apartment community that does have a pro EV outlook, if you don't have the ability to get a plug at home, and I say just like a 220, even if it's not a 50 or 60 amp, even if it's just a 30 amp, I think you should strongly consider other options. If you do not have that ability to get a plug at home. Now, if you're just driving a little bit and you have a 110, your daily commute's 30 miles, you can probably get by with a 110. But the reality is there's a lot of apartment and condo dwellers that don't even have that option. Like, they can't even use a 110.
And even hotels. Most hotels don't have charging. I mean, I literally
there's a lot now.
Well, honestly, last two road trips, I was calling multiple hotels saying, do you have a charging bay? And they're like, yes, we actually do. Great. I show up to the hotel, they have one.
Yep.
And of course it's taken.
Yeah, that's why
I got so pissed off, and of course they never left all night, and so I was SOL. I had to drive an hour and 10 minutes out of the way in the morning to go charge, and I barely made it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think Hilton and others are, and I think it's the benefit now that everybody's switching to Tesla's plug. I think there's a lot of hotels and a lot of businesses and entities that were
if you're listening to this, guys, if this video happens to get picked up in the algorithm and you own a hotel or an apartment complex, like, no brainer. If you want a competitive advantage right now.
Well, especially with Tesla's universal charger now, where it has the Magic Dock built in.
Throw 4 or 5 bays in the parking lot.
That thing's a no-brainer. I mean, you can support every EV on the market just about, other than the old, shade mode chat. Yeah, that's how I've always said it. Yeah, Chadbo. You're not going to support that, but 99% of the EVs on the road you're going to be able to support with Tesla's new universal, wall charger, the destination charger. It's a no-brainer. I mean, they look great. Now that they've won the plug war, I think there's a lot of people who are waiting to invest in, charging infrastructure because they didn't know which one to get. They didn't know what's going to be the best one to cover for customers, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing with electric vehicles right now. We're talking about mostly the negative side of the picture. 95% of the time, you're not going to have any issues with charging.
Let's transition a little bit. We talked about this, but the camera got cut off, guys, because it only charged 15 minutes apparently on 4K. But some of the FUD out there, like we were talking, I thought some great points about, if you charge an EV, a lot of guys out there think that it's really bad for the environment still because of how the electricity was made. I think you guys are smart. I think you should talk about that. So give it a shot.
Absolutely.
What's your opinion when you hear that? And I hear it all the time in my comments,
Well, yeah, so I'll take it first again. And so basically, my thought is less than 20% of our energy source is actually even from coal, which is the worst in terms of pollution.
Which has drastically gone down.
It's drastically gone down. It used to be probably closer to 30 to 40. He probably has the exact figures. But here in Tennessee, we're fortunate to have the TVA. We have a very heavy nuclear, wind, natural gas, hydro. We have a pretty healthy mix here, so we're not as dependent on any one source in Tennessee, thankfully. So really in Tennessee, we're not ever gonna have one silver bullet that solves all of our energy problems. But even with our current energy mix, it's far cleaner and far more efficient to charge a Tesla than it is any other comparable vehicle on the road. that's a gas vehicle. You know.
Now, why? In easiest layman terms, why?
So really, the biggest reason is that every electric car on the road just about is pushing in the 90s of percentile of efficiency. So like you're saying 93 to 95% efficient at putting power to the wheels, of taking power from that battery pack and putting it to the wheels. And even if you lose a couple percent charging it, converting it from AC to DC for the vehicle, you're still talking about, just like I said, about a 90% efficiency, whereas some of the most efficient gas cars on the planet are barely 30%. And that's like, again, a plug-in hybrid Prius or something like that, not a Mustang vehicle that's still getting smoked by a Tesla.
You're getting an old pushrod V8. I mean, the thing's probably losing 85% of its actual gas to energy conversion due to heat loss.
Yep.
So
heat or friction or anything. Yeah, you just have a whole lot of moving parts to get it from the engine for where it exploded, to control explosions to the wheels. Yeah.
Gas engines are heat generators that have a side effect of creating power for your car.
Yep. And I think it's a great tie into how you were framing it earlier. Even if we were 100% coal, take it from there of how.
Even if you're charging 100% off of coal, the systems designed around turning that coal into energy are still way more efficient than turning fuel into power for your car. So still plugging into the wall in a coal-powered location is still going to be far more efficient and better for the environment than using a gas-powered engine.
Right. Not to mention lower maintenance, and now.
Well, and one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is that regenerative braking doesn't use any brakes in your car. It uses the electric motor to put energy back into the battery and slow it down. So you have these really heavy vehicles, but then you're not really having to use your brakes all that much.
And that's all wasted energy. I mean, that's again, any other vehicle, and it's only possible because you have an electric motor that could become a generator and a battery to store it in.
Yeah.
And so it's something you cannot get in a normal internal combustion vehicle unless it's a hybrid. You cannot get that regenerative braking. That's huge. I mean, like you have electric vehicles lasting over 200,000 miles just on a set of brake pads, not even a rotors. But I mean,
all right, let's go to another FUD, right? So you were just telling me that you drive a Toyota Land Cruiser, or no,
it's a 4Runner, third gen 4Runner.
Similar. How long have you had that thing?
Oh, Ori's the original owner.
Yeah, but 25
It's a 98, so I mean, yeah.
Okay.
But we've been together 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, so 1998, 2008, 2018, and we're in 2024, so well north of 25 years, right? How many miles has it got on it?
It's got about 160,000, I think.
Okay.
Which is nothing for a 4Runner.
So, right. So
just broken in.
A lot of comments, even recently, on the Cybertruck and some other, always the FUD comments, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt comments, are talking about the fact that your battery's going to go out in 8 to 10 years. Your warranty's 8 to 10 years, and so what are you going to do, right? And replacing a 135 kilowatt battery pack, Aaron, is not going to be cheap. Let's be fair.
It'll be cheaper in 10 years, but nonetheless, it's going to be a big bill.
It is, and now one of the things you did say earlier is that you can replace sections versus the entire battery versus like a Tesla where you replace the entire unit. But talk about that. I think that's a big concern, frankly, for a lot of car buyers. And that's why they're holding on to their cars like you are.
You're not. It's actually one of the number one questions I get. I've always gotten is, what do you do when the battery goes out?
And the reason is your phone, right? Your iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most. It's funny because the least advanced battery they have is the one driving their buying decision on something that's far more advanced. And I get the sentiment. It's something they don't understand. It's new. And the reality is, I think there's two camps, right? There's the anti-electric car camps that will tell you every 30,000 miles your battery's going to die and you got to replace it for $100,000, right? That's just we've probably heard this.
Extreme.
That's the extreme. Which Hyundai's probably giving some reinforcement to that recently. Out there, you've seen that news,
can you blame consumers?
You can't blame them
when there's actual case studies like that.
And then there's the Tesla fans that will tell you it's going to last 1 million miles. And the reality is really closer to the middle. I mean, you're going to have like we were talking about earlier. You're probably going to see some cars in 10 or 20 years are still on their original battery. I think it's the law of statistics that some people are going to have good luck and they're going to care for their vehicle and they're going to do all the right things and have some luck along the way. Whereas I think the average, I think nowadays you're probably going to see at least 200,000 miles out of the average vehicle battery pack before it needs any major work to it. Now you're absolutely going to see some that die in 60,000 miles or some that die in 80,000 miles. They're highly complicated things. It could even just be something like a relay that goes out in it and makes your battery have to be serviced by, and by service, I mean, some of that service can only be done at Tesla headquarters for a Tesla.
Right.
Like, I mean, you have to send that battery back. They give you a remand. You're not even getting that old battery back.
Most gas cars aren't Toyota 4Runners either.
Exactly. Yeah, certainly
they
not.
don't last 35 years on the same engine with.
The vast majority are not 4Runners.
They're not that way. They require a lot more maintenance and upkeep. And even if we just take a look, let's say the battery dies in 15 years and it has to be completely taken out and replaced, and it's $15,000. How much money have you spent in maintenance over that amount of time in a gas car?
And I'll tell you, for me, because, like I was saying earlier, I went from the P85 Model S I had for 6 years. I went from that to back to our 4Runner during COVID. And I really found that it was a transition. I mean, I kind of feel like I was going back in time, but like the number one headache I've had has been actually having to go get oil changes. Like it's just every time I go, it's an hour and a half. I would change it myself, but anybody that's had a 3rd gen 4Runner knows that you cannot change the oil in that thing without making a mess. And I'm at a state of my life where I just don't want to do that anymore. Right. So I'm doing a lot of driving. I mean, I just got my Y about 5 weeks ago. I've already put 3,300 miles on it since I got it. I would be getting closer to an oil change. And every time I go, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, and to your point, if you go 200,000 miles in a battery, that's 40 oil changes, I guess.
I'm not going to try and do the math because that all will change based on the vehicle and what the maintenance schedule is.
And if you're using synthetic or not,
But what I can tell you is that if you do like pre-purchase maintenance, I had an Audi years ago. If I bought that and did pre-purchase maintenance for I think the first 3 years of a brand new vehicle, it was something around $3,000, and that was giving a discount on what it would have cost just to go to the dealership. Now, of course, a dealership is going to be more expensive than taking it somewhere else. Nonetheless, it is going to cost a lot of money to maintain a gas vehicle, and they can last you forever. People love BMWs. I mentioned this before. People love their BMWs. I've had a BMW. I loved it too. When you treat them right, they will last forever, despite being unreliable. Technically, you can't just drive them into the ground like you can the Toyota 4Runner.
So you still have to change oil in that thing,
But electric cars are the same. Like if you treat the battery properly, it is going to last just like any other vehicle. You treat it right, it is going to last you a long time. And some are going to have design flaws that others don't have, but most cars are not a Toyota 4Runner. You treat a battery well, it's going to last you a very long time. You charge up to 80% on most of the current battery chemistries. Some of them with the lithium iron phosphate, they allow you to go up to 100% every day. But you be a little cognizant of how you're treating the vehicle, and it will last you a very, very long time if we're talking about the motors and the battery.
Right.
You're probably, by the time those are done, you're going to want a new car anyway.
Right.
And the amount of time, money, and energy that you have saved not having to deal with oil changes and gas stations.
And the amount of waste that's generated by spark plugs, air filters, oil changes, all that
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
brake pads.
That wants to go
it's
somewhere.
A ton. Yeah, exactly. It goes in your landfill, And the thing is, too, and this is another common FUD, too, Aaron, is that when the battery is done, it can be recycled, up to about 90, 95%?
Yeah, so most people don't really realize lithium in batteries, especially with new techniques, it's not gone. It doesn't wear out. It just gets a little
crystallized.
Basically crystallized on it.
Yep.
You get those and you recycle them, and 100% of the metals can be reused.
Wow.
They just cleaned up and reused like brand new material.
And that's assuming, to your point, that that's the worst case scenario. That cell is actually bad. Like it's not functional anymore.
Because they can just recycle the individual cells into things like power walls or grid side energy batteries.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, even after a Tesla pack, say a Tesla pack's driven 250,000 miles, it's worked the whole time, or even had to go get repaired and sent back to another car, has 250,000 miles, say it has 80% degradation, which is honestly not likely to happen that fast, but that battery still has a very long lifespan ahead of it, like being like 1 or 2 decades that it can be in an energy grid storage. With no issues, and frankly,
it is that degraded. It doesn't really have much more in terms of degradation.
Exactly.
So it's not.
It actually slows down.
Yeah. And that's really the thing that people don't realize about batteries either. It's not like here it is and then it's just dead.
It's not like a cliff. It's
batteries just it kind of, you're gonna see the biggest drop off the first year you have it, especially if you drive it 100%. That's the major drop off, but you're just going to see a slow decrease in the amount of range. And people are going to go, well, gas cars, that doesn't happen on. That's not true. Gas cars become less efficient as they age as well.
And frankly, the grid storage...
You're not going to lose 20% of your range on a gas car, but you probably lose a few percent.
But
the injectors gunk up.
And frankly, once you pull that battery...
You're spending more money on fuel at that point, on top of higher cost of maintenance because the car is older.
And frankly, when you pull that battery and you put it into grid storage, it's actually going to be easier on the battery in a grid storage environment because you're going to have way less peak current demands going to it and a lot less peak charging going to it. Like you're never going to charge like in a normal house, that is, like unless it's actually in a large utility scale energy grid storage. In a house, you're never going to pump 250 kilowatts into that battery. And you're never going to draw that kind of power out of it. So like it's actually gonna have a much easier lifespan once it gets pulled out of a car. It'll last even longer.
And even the ultra fast charging, I have a lot of people that are curious about EVs, and they'll go, well, is the fast charging, that's gonna be really bad for the battery? It really isn't.
Yeah, it's not as bad.
Because the way the battery management works, it's not like it just throws all that energy into just one part of the battery. You have to remember, these batteries are made up of thousands of cells. So it balances that load among a bunch of different cells, so it's not really wearing them out any faster than just charging from a...
And the biggest thing is it's doing it at the perfect temperature it wants to be. Like it won't let it get over a temperature, and it won't feed it that much power unless it's over a temperature. Like so it keeps it at that perfect temperature for the best lifespan of the battery. Like that's why they have such complicated thermal management systems, especially Teslas. I frankly think Rivian and some others need to catch up a little bit with things like the octave valve and stuff like that. But frankly, they all have very elaborate thermal management systems. Even Rivians, the one I probably throw the most shade at is the Mach-E, the Ford Mach-E. They have like 40 coolant tubes in that thing.
Really?
Oh yeah, like 36 or 38 different coolant tubes.
Coolant tubes.
Yeah,
huh? That's a lot
I
of
think
weight.
four water pumps.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
wow.
I'll send you a video. Sandy Monroe did a great teardown of that one. And actually, his team did a great comparison of the Mach-E versus a Model Y, and like it's pretty night and day. I mean, and their point is they say this is one of the next best non-EVs in that market compared to a Model Y that you could buy. Yeah.
And they had the Model 3 to benchmark, and all those, the Model S.
Yeah.
Just they couldn't.
And they'll get there, I think.
Yeah, they will. But it's first gen tech.
That's the kind of stuff that adds to their cost. I mean, they want to complain about their bottom line. They want to complain about how they can't compete with Tesla on cost and price. Well, maybe you need to start shrinking, getting rid of some of these coolant.
It's because they threw together their products too. They saw people want EVs, so well, crap. Now we got to go make something. They do it as quickly as possible.
Well, they saw the opportunity with the market cap because of Tesla.
Exactly.
That's where the money was.
It's like a teenager doing their homework last minute.
If you just think about it logically, electric vehicles are far less complex than a gas-powered vehicle, so your profit margin should be higher. So if somebody is selling an EV at a loss, it's either growing pains in the case of Lucid or Rivian, because it costs a lot of money to build up a factory, or it is a incredibly poorly designed for manufacturing product.
Right. That's an interesting point.
And most of these other products weren't intended to be their mass scale products. Like, even with Rivian, like the R1T and the R1S, like wasn't meant to be the R2 that's coming, right? Yeah. It's meant to be their product to help them learn, to figure out what worked and what didn't work in the real world.
Which is what the S was and the X.
To fund the further development.
You have the flagship product.
Exactly.
You spend your R&D on that. You get the wealthiest consumers to jump in and
to help cover the costs.
And even if they're losing money on those, which a lot of the companies go in planning on that, they know that because that's how they get everything designed for the future models. And then at scale, these become profitable too. So it's planned out properly. EVs should be as profitable as Tesla makes.
It's come up a lot. Is like, what would happen if tomorrow everybody was driving an electric car in the grid? And simply, I mean, obviously, that kind of change overnight wouldn't be a good thing. It would
crash it.
I don't think it would. I mean, crash is a strong word, but I think that there would be more
peak
problems
summer,
than that.
Heat, peak winter, cold.
Really, the winter has been the bigger challenge. Because of so many homes don't have even heat pumps, or even the ones that have heat pumps, you go to below zero, it's kicking into emergency heat.
Sure.
So that's where, again, most of these homes don't have natural gas heat. So it's really the winter that's been the bigger challenge in a lot of these states.
But it is a realistic issue.
But the fact is, like, no one expects it to happen tomorrow. Like, no one expects. It's just you cannot. Like, there's not enough manufacturing capacity in the world to have everybody in America have an electric car tomorrow, and no one says it should be that
one
way.
of the things I'm concerned
But that's
about.
a thought experiment.
Exactly.
Like, you do it tomorrow, but even then, that's a great example of where statistics lie, because the thought is like everybody has an EV, they're all plugged into the wall. Is everybody at the gas station at the same time?
Exactly.
No. It makes no sense, and it's so much more decentralized than something like a gas station, and as well as the ability in the future to have vehicle to grid, which the hardware of that is already built into most of the EVs on sale today. That allows instant creation of microgrids, backing up during peak hours. There's a lot of benefits to that. But even if we tomorrow all had EVs.
Pause you real quick. Vehicle to grid is like when the Rivian plugs into your home and you can charge off. You can charge or run certain features of your home.
Vehicle to grid would be directly into the grid.
Yep.
Which
could go either way,
would
really.
still go into your home and then that goes into the grid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just taking yeah. But it gives you the option to sell it back to the grid. Sometimes at a higher cost than you paid in to get it. So like you actually can make money potentially on.
And vehicle to grid
I do see your
has
point
the
on
potential
disaster.
to completely be passive. So you're plugged into a destination charger, to use a Tesla terminology. Plugged into an AC one, you plug in that has vehicle to grid in it, and then it will automatically decide like, oh, need to pull a little power right now, as long as it's making sure that it's still putting in more. And then the other thing is, people go, well, there's not enough DC fast chargers. They're right, there isn't. But we don't need as many as we think we do either.
And we don't need to replace every gas station with a DC fast charger. If anything, like I was saying earlier,
You don't fuel up at home.
Exactly.
You can charge at home. And a lot of people can. Not everybody can, of course. There's people in apartments
and frankly, every one stall we build could be how many? Like 10 or 20 at least, like level 2 destination chargers. Yeah.
Hotels,
if not 40.
apartments, condo buildings, all should just be putting in EV chargers just as a baseline. Any new project out there, they really should just already be putting them in.
I'll tell you where I actually really think the future lies, and I haven't said this at all today, is I really do think the future for things like condos and apartments is going to lie in wireless charging. I think embedded into parking lots. You're getting rid of the cord, issue of having a cord droop everywhere.
Wireless charging. Huh?
And I think
what kind of kilowatts
for your home?
And I think it's going to be a very long-term thing. That's not going to be around tomorrow. It's not going to even be probably mainstream in 5 or 10 years, maybe 10 years.
Especially with how energy inefficient.
Well, actually, interestingly, I used to think that they're highly more inefficient, but there are ways to have it be just about as efficient, because you can send it straight as DC. So that means you can offload the conversion of the AC to DC, which typically happens inside the car with your onboard charger. Like most people see the cord and like that's the charger. You guys both know that that's not the charger. That's just the cord that plugs into your car. The actual charger for your car when you're charging at home or at a level 2 charger is actually inside the car. Yeah. So they're having to fit that charger from a size and space constraint to what would fit in the car and be carrying that weight with you everywhere you go. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they had a wireless charger, since it could send in straight DC power, you could have a much larger box that can be more efficient in converting that to DC to help make up for those losses that you would lose in transmitting it wirelessly. What kind of kilowatts
would you get up to though?
Well, you can get the same, 220 speed. I mean, you can get, you can send
a wireless charger.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's incredible.
To further that, I think that you wouldn't even have to go to that speed if, and I know there's been concepts of this built. So I know technically it's a possibility. Reality might not be, but the induction roads that could trickle power into vehicles.
That's how bullet trains run, correct?
Yeah.
There's not an electric motor on the train. It's just running off of magnets and electricity as it
Which
goes,
are directly
right?
in the rails of
I think the technology is certainly capable of doing that. I'm less of a believer in that in the long run, just because of how much, how hard it would be.
A complete overhaul of some pretty.
Exactly, and frankly, I think they're exposed to so much. I mean, just look at our roads when it rains and snows here. I mean, we get potholes galore, and you start damaging that, right?
And there's the government in terms of they're much better at short-term thinking than long-term thinking.
Exactly.
It would be really easy to spend 3 times as much to put in 100-year asphalt versus 20-year asphalt, but they don't want to do that because they'd rather just put in new roads at a cheaper price right now. So it's the short-term government thinking. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it operates at this moment. You and I might be able to go and look at it and go, well, put in the good stuff so we don't have to think about it. It's going to be cheaper over time.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, like on the wireless charging note, like I think 10 years from now you'll probably have a compelling product that will be able to do it. It probably won't be in mass at that point, but I think
that would be fantastic though if you literally just pulled in your Tesla and it just started charging off the floor.
Exactly, and I think you'll still have cords. You'll have cords for decades, but like if you're building a new apartment in 10 years, why would you not, like, you already have the parking lot opened up, it's not been paved yet, like why would you not embed it in the parking lot? Yep. It can identify the car, you could build the person all through
paint
the
meter around it,
and you could even in your card tell it
sense.
if you want to be able to charge or not, that location. They could say we detected power available.
There's going to be, you know, alignment issues and things like that. I mean, look at like Apple finally put wireless charging on the phones, but they added a ring of magnets around it for a reason, because you just set a phone on a charging pad. If it's not lined up properly or there's not enough coils in there, it's not going to charge your phone. So that might be an issue with inductive charging too, is proper alignment. What if you pull too far into your garage, not enough into your garage, you just get out and leave it?
I think by then, another 10 years, that'll be figured out. You know, it's
but nothing's ever as reliable as a cable.
Well, this is the conclusion, guys. This is a long video. I personally learned a lot. You know, it's a lot of interesting stuff. The whole point of this video was to let you know that when Ford and Rivian are given all of these great benefits of using our Tesla network, right? You're not really getting full access to the 30,000 chargers. You're getting access to just the V3 and the V4. It's interesting to think about as a Tesla owner having this massive thing with a 135 kilowatt battery taking up 2 slots. And there's already going to be an issue there, I think, that we're going to be dealing with this year especially. And hopefully you learned something about just the fact that batteries can be recycled, a lot of the FUD out there to do with just winter. I think we covered a lot of good points, right? You know, overall lifespan of the vehicles and just many little nuggets of consciousness. So anything you guys want to add or say to anybody watching this video?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we hit all the topics today. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just, you know, let us know in the comments if you think it's worth waiting for, you know, to buy an EV if you have the option of waiting.
Retrofit it.
And also let us know if you think when they do add the Tesla port, are they going to let you use the older chargers? Are you going to magically be able to use all the Tesla locations? And why wouldn't they tell you that right now? That's just the thing to be thinking about. Yeah.
Well, because they won't let you use them because they won't talk to it right now.
Well, no, but I'm talking about why wouldn't they tell you if you are switched, if like next year when they have Tesla's plug, they may know that they're going to be able to support all of them, but they know that if they told you that, you would wait to buy it.
Yep.
Right? And they don't want you to know that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right though. I would probably personally hold off on buying a Rivian, but it could be a while. And Aaron's point was it could be over a year or 2 before they make the retrofit.
I think you'll probably see Ford, just like they're getting the adapter first, I think you'll see Ford's Lightning probably get the plug first because they were the first to announce it. I think Tesla probably does want to reward that, that leap of faith on their part. But I think Rivian, I think everybody else is committed to a 2025, year model NACS port.
Which means it's going to have to move from the right to the left. Or to the back.
It doesn't have to, because Tesla's not going to be the only one out there manufacturing chargers. And their chargers with the V4 have longer cables on it. I think that this change will actually be great for EV fast charging in general, because now there's no reason to not go and build a bunch of them as any other of the other third-party chargers, because now they know everybody is using this same charger. Sure. It'll create more competition, and hopefully it'll start to drive down the prices of DC fast charging in time too. What we're looking at now is short-term issues.
Oh, 100%.
Short-term growing pains. Yep. And they'll be gone in a while. Even this, with having to use an adapter, I don't think I'll have any issues going up to any fast charger and using it here in a year, 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, what happens when you're taking up my 2 bays, buddy?
That's my point. I don't think that's going to be, because they'll just pull off that exterior part that looks like a V3 charger, and the back end might still be V3. They'll put on a V4 with a longer cable, and it'll be fine. Yeah. And then I'm not taking up 2 spots. I'm taking up 1.
I mean, if they would just do that,
it's on Tesla right now to fix their side of the issue. But in terms of everything else, you're going to see NACS just start dropping like that on Electrify America, EVgo, ChargePoint, Volta. They have no reason to not accelerate their rollout now.
So I think probably where you're going to see the most Tesla retrofits going is stations that they add more stalls to, like like Jackson, they just upgraded it from a V2 to a V3. I think that's the ones you're going to see a Core be added, but I mean, there's still thousands of V1, V2 chargers out there. I mean, like literally thousands in North America. I don't think Tesla's going to overnight even prioritize replacing those or upgrading those, because they know all the money it takes to upgrade those, they could just be adding more. They could just be throwing more at the wall, and that's one less charger on the road versus.
But I'm not talking about changing the entire thing.
You're right, yeah.
Just the physical stall, that's a pretty easy thing to manufacture.
For the V3s it is, to change, to your point earlier, to change, the cord from a V3 to a V4 style cord, it's certainly, easy.
Yeah, you're just replacing the physical aspect of it. All of the back-end hardware, that's the hard stuff to put in. So if Tesla can manufacture those V4 front ends, they can replace all of their V2, V3s very easily.
Not the V2s aren't liquid cooled though, I believe.
Well, the liquid cooling happens inside of the front unit, not in the back end.
I'll talk about in the cord though. I mean, because it even goes into the cord. So there's going to be more. I think it's not as simple as just changing the pylon, is what I'm saying. Is with the longer cord
with the V2
on the V2.
V3,
V3 will be that simple.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the actual physical supercharging stand. All those big boxes
I know.
that you see in the back, that's the expensive, hard to manufacture stuff that takes a long time.
Of course.
Just that box that you pull the cable from, that's all they really have to replace, and they can manufacture those much faster.
But you got to think like the V2s and V3s, even when the chargers are liquid cooled in a V2, they don't have coolant lines running to those pylons. So it's not as simple as like a bolt-on swap. It's still cheaper than building a whole new charger. Certainly.
I could be wrong, but I think the liquid cooling all happens within the actual outside unit that you interact with.
Gotcha. And I could be. I'm not honestly going to pretend to be an expert on that.
I won't be either. I think that's how it works, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and you're right, because I know there is certainly cooling in the pylon. You're definitely right, because you can hear the fans on that thing kick on. But I don't know, honestly. It's a good question. Maybe someone in the comments could tell us.
Well, I tell you what, we've lost so many clips because my phone stopped recording. So because apparently the iPhone only records 15 minutes at a time. Lots of great stuff, guys. Hopefully some of this was helpful. Really appreciate you watching. Definitely different than most of my videos. We got a ton of car reviews, lots of fun montages and driving and all that. This is just hopefully, he hit me up and I thought this was something that needed to be said on camera. If you own one of these, and I'm really nervous as a Tesla owner, I gotta be honest, and I really wanted to make sure I said that, because if I lose bays to you guys, I'm gonna be a little salty about it.
I think it's a double-edged sword though, because the one good thing about this as a Tesla owner is that all these other companies like Ford, GM have committed to actual dollars to Tesla.
The only good one is that we can maybe one day go to Electrify America if they actually get their SO.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about like Ford and GM and all them are giving Tesla money to build more chargers, as part of their deals. Not all of them, but the big ones.
The government is also giving Tesla and these others, of course, federal funds in order to build out more too, because the requirement was that you have to be able to charge other vehicles, not just a single brand. So now Tesla can get that money from the government, everybody else is getting that money from the government, and it's a single standard. So the overall stalls, even if they're not Tesla stalls, are going to go way up in number, and it's going to work for everybody.
And they're going to be, that's necessary, let's be honest. So. Well, anyway, we'll see what happens. It's 2024 here, and let's see what happens, guys. But I really appreciate Aaron and Tim. You guys are awesome. Some of the smartest guys I know. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Spending the afternoon with my small audience here, and we will catch you guys on the next one.